Dave Hodges here, host of the Common Sense Show. We are the show that's freeing America one enslaved mind at a time. We're based on God, family, country, and helping you know what's going on, what's likely to happen so you can best prepare. You live in a time of great change, and we're going through a civilization changeover, a makeover, if you will. It's a lot like, well, it's just like any renaissance you've done in your personal life. And I'm going to take a few minutes and talk about this as a kickoff for today's segments, which are really, really important. And I'm going to be shocking a few of you with what I'm going to talk about and what I'm going to propose. And oh, I know the backlash and the allegations that you're this and you're that. They're going to come. And the Eskimos have a really good saying: the dogs may bark, but the caravan moves on. Regardless of what names people want to call you, the labels they put on you, you got to stay true to your mission. Now, with Anna Kasparian, just as an example, I don't agree with everything that Anna says, but I've seen her on a couple of shows recently, Piers Morgan, and she got taken to the woodshed by some very unprofessional, uncouth, uncivilized people who, because she dared to disagree with the mighty nation of Israel, she's this and she's that and she's the other. And I admired how she stood her ground. I did. And I don't see her as being anti-Semitic. I didn't hear her say anything. She talked specifically about leaders and their actions. That has nothing to do with a pejorative comment about a population of people. Yet the leaders of certain people want to take any kind of professional criticism, generalize it to say, you're a bigot and we need to deal with you. That day's coming. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about the fact that America needs to unify. And we're going to talk about that right here on the Common Sense Show. And listen, feel free to comment, but I'm warning you. We are living in a transitional period. I'm going to go through what I mean by that, what it means to you and to me, and then most importantly, what we got to do to get ready, because things are going to change whether you're ready or not. If you're ready and you know some options, you have a chance to stay at least one step ahead of that burning bridge. If you want to get consumed by that burning bridge, that's entirely up to you. I wanted to show you who's the sponsor for this particular segment, and it's the good people from Nanosoma. And I'm biased in this. These products restored my life. The one product, the first product, the Nanosoma spray saved my life. Quality doctors telling me, Dave, you've been pretty healthy guy, but my goodness, you've got strip lung linings with RSV, not likely to come back. And my good friend is like to tell the story, Scotty Sachs from Sovereign Radio and Salem Radio. Scotty said, Dave, try this and use it as much as you want because it's all natural. And I'll be darned if in a week I wasn't better. In a month, I was in the gym defying all the medical stuff. But then the second problem happened. I was so active that the old joint issues, the inflammation, the arthritis, it crept back in. And again, Scotty to the rescue. Dave, try the Nanosoma gel. Rub it on, it grows pluripotent stem cells. Here are the research for it. There's over 30 studies on these products, and you will get relief. How long it takes? It varies. How long you've had the condition, how severe it is, where it's at. For me, it took 6 to 8 weeks. But today, there's not much I can't do. Today's full body workout, and I'm even adding the duck walk to what I'm doing. If you'd told me I would have done that 3 years ago, I'd have said you're out of your mind. But I'm going to do it. And you can too. And then there's the skin cream for cuts and burns, and you've seen me use that on screen, and I've demonstrated how it helped. Together, that's the 3-pack. 15% off the starter pack, the 3-pack. All you got to do is go to iwantmyhealthback.com/Dave Hodges. iwantmyhealthback.com/Dave Hodges. Well, I came across a book years and years and years and years ago, more years than I want to admit. And I was a young man. And there were two books that profoundly impressed me. And this is before my father's revelations about how the world really works based on what he had done that was classified. And the first book, and this applies to all of us, was called Between Two Ages, the Technotronic Era. Interesting. Technotronic, technocracy. Exactly. Now, you know who wrote the book? Zygmunt Brzezinski, the co-founder of the Trilateral Commission with David Rockefeller. They were trying to go regionalism on the way to globalism. And the Trilaterals took over Jimmy Carter's presidency. In fact, they got him elected. And then they staffed all their people on that. And on that, we got the privilege of turning China into a huge competitor, giving away the Panama Canal, which President Trump, and I congratulate him on this, is trying to get it back. People are saying, Dave, I thought you were mad at him. Okay, the war is one issue. It doesn't mean he's not doing other things that I agree with. And he has negated China's influence in the Panama Canal, which benefits us. But the Trilateral Commission, to me, is a very evil organization. I do not like this organization. They have way too much influence in our government, along with the Council on Foreign Relations, which was Rockefeller created 1920s creation because we didn't get into the League of Nations after World War I because the Senate rejected it because they didn't like the president. I didn't like Wilson either. I agree with what they did. And so they came up with this international group. And this has dominated American politics and increasingly more so as time has gone on. And what Brzezinski talked about is he said there are changes that happen at different levels. You have the political, the social, the technological, the economic. And he said they pretty much march lockstep together when things change, but one can be ahead of the other. And he said economics often sets the stage for later change. I agree. He went back and he talked about the Bronze Age. He talked about, moving into other technologies and then gunpowder and the printing press and going forward. He said the industrial age. Think about the industrial age. The world was primarily agrarian, right? Then here came the industrial age. Well, a lot of farmers abandoned their farms and went to work in the cities and the factories. This led to the growth of cities. We used to be 90% rural, and then we flipped that. We're now 90% urban. And farmers are saying, I don't have to worry about droughts and all the bad stuff, infestations that can happen to my crops. The Dust Bowl, don't have to worry about that. So I'm going to go to work in the factories. And this represented a major change in America, but it was the abuse of the worker. And it took labor unions and governmental pressure to change that. And the governments had to be pressured into pressuring the unions to conform to some degree, but also to the owners of the businesses, the robber barons, as they're often called in history, to change. Now, his point was this. As you transition from one age to another, okay, as you go from the agricultural age to the industrial age, you go through a generation of what he called hell on earth. It's really hard on that generation, hence all the labor abuses that took place in the 1880s, 1890s, the way that immigrants brought in for cheap labor, mostly from Eastern and Western Europe, how they were abused. And of course, we had Chinese people working on the railroads and they were abused. And yeah, you get the idea. Okay. And this is all in that same time frame. And he said this is a natural part of changing. He said then we reach a level of stability for a while until the next big change comes. Well, we've gone through a change prior to this. We moved into the high tech change, and it's affected how we fight wars. It's made wars more plausible, perhaps even more affordable, and you can sell it better to the public if body bags aren't coming home because you're using drone strikes and missile systems and so forth. And so that was a change, but we're now transitioning from the high tech to the digital. And it's a hybrid movement. It's high tech plus digital. And we're going to go through hell on earth, and we're beginning to feel the brunt of that right now. The data centers, talk to someone that lives within a mile of a data center. They can't sleep at night. Why? Because of the constant noise. The air is polluted. So much for climate change. Bill Gates even said this the other day. Well, climate change might not have been quite as bad as we thought. We still need to be mindful about it. But, yeah, the but, because they don't want to limit what the data centers are doing. And of course, in my case here in northern Maricopa County, my utility rates have gone up 17% to support the data centers. We need a couple of roads put in south of us to support some of the growth. Instead, we have huge traffic bottlenecks about 10 miles away from us, where it used to be totally rural. And they won't build these roads, which are an easy fix. The dirt roads are there, they're just not passable. But if you go out north of us, about 20 miles to the northeast, you've got data centers going in like crazy, and they're putting in all this infrastructure. They can afford that, but they can't take care of the regular citizens. It's rules for thee, but not for me. We're going into the technocratic age, to technocracy. And Zbigniew Brzezinski published his book in 1970. So that means this was over 56 years ago. He's looking at these things and he's saying, this is where we're going. He describes in his book almost perfectly where we're at now. By the way, as an anecdote and a side note, he was actually the Soviet studies professor at Occidental College for someone named Barack Obama. Barack Obama was groomed for this job for a long time before he became president. And I've done a story on this before. I'm not going to digress too far on this. But we are now in the Technotronic era. The second book that really made an impact on me was back in the 80s. And I'm reading this as a relatively young guy. And it was a book written by Pat Wood. And coincidentally, it was called Trilaterals, meaning Trilateral Commission, Trilaterals over Washington. And Pat, who's a friend of mine today, we have actually worked on things together. Pat wrote this book with the late Professor Anthony Sutton from American University, and they detailed how the Constitution of the United States was being, let's say, sidestepped. We were looking at wealth transfer that was unwarranted. Congress was increasingly getting elected into office to basically do a fascist partnership with big business, the high-tech moguls of the day, and they were both profiting enormously at the public's expense, and that foreign policy became a means for the rich to get richer and for the middle class and below to support it. And he talked about a technocratic grid. People laughed when I first had him on my show and we talked about this. If we go back, I'm sorry, I'll click this off. If we go back, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of how long ago, Pat and I, about 15 years. But if we go back 15, 18 years, and I had Pat on my show, he was talking about the smart meters. And he said they all talk to each other, or they have the potential to. And he said, you'll have a North American grid, and we're moving towards that now. And he said, eventually this will hook up with the European grid. And he says, eventually you'll have one hive mind technocratic group that will control all energy on the planet. We are clearly moving in that direction. But when he said that many, many years ago, people wrote to me, Dave, has he lost his mind? I used to really respect what he did, and he's crazy. He's not crazy. Almost everything he has said with technology and applied to technocracy is happened or it's coming true now. We're in the process. And his book, Trials Over Washington, I learned about how the media was co-opted, like CBS was owned directly by the Rockefellers, and the Rockefellers and Friends, five other groups, they own 98% of the media. Pat was one of the first to really identify that. And I thought, my gosh, this is really fascism on steroids disguised as a constitutional republic. Well, we still have elements of a constitutional republic, but some of this other stuff that's going on is not what I learned in my American government class. That's not taught. This is like the fourth branch of government. Actually, we have five branches of government. One are the elite, which have the separate rules for themselves, which many times are extra constitutional. Like they're talking about, Rokan is talking about a billionaire tax now. Okay. Yeah. And what will their lawyers do? They'll write that taxation law. Remember, the IRS guides were written by the Rockefeller lawyers. The banking regulations were written by the people that set up the Federal Reserve. Okay. And so what you'll have is the ultra elite, they'll have their lawyers write the regulations for the taxes that they'll have loopholes to get out of. And then they'll expand it, and you and I will pay more tax to fund more projects to put money in their pockets. Oh, I'm not being radical, people. This is exactly what Brzezinski said. And by the way, he was also the national security advisor to Jimmy Carter. This isn't a lightweight I'm talking about. Now, he passed, 10, 12 years ago, but he had a profound impact. He also said this too. If you want to understand why we've moved to multinational corporations in the last 20 years at rapid pace, and why there's a move for international cooperative agreements that blend nations together, including militaries like the NDAA Section 224, blending Israel and America's militaries together, and that proposed legislation that's probably going to be passed in January. That's happening because what Brzezinski talked about in his book, and Pat has echoed this, is that there was a time in America in the late 60s, we were so wealthy as a nation that we bought all the TVs. We bought all the conveniences and eventually the microwave ovens. But what about the market overseas? Well, we got to create those markets. We have to go in. Of course, we're doing it under the guise of rescuing people from dictatorship and tyranny. And we're going to bring in capitalism. We did, and we brought in fascism with a new dictator. But we raised their standard of living through your tax dollars and CIA interventions. And now we created global customers for products that were being produced domestically. And then we learned, well, we can move our businesses overseas and have much cheaper labor costs. And this was the beginning of the end of wealthy purchase power by the middle class. Oh, we middle class live like, I mean, the richest people in the world outside the elite or in America in the middle class. I remember when foreign leaders would come here and we're not really that rich. We have inner city ghettos and lots of poverty and misery. And they take them on these tours. And they said, in my country, this is upper class. Well, that's changed now. 65% of Americans can't afford a $500 car repair bill. Okay, that's called treading water. A lot of America, we are treading water. Occasionally, we'll have an advertiser that has a really valuable service or benefit, and people say, oh, Dave, I'd love to, but I can barely stay in my home. I can barely afford rent. And they basically have just sucked the life out of this country. 19 people, according to Rokana, control 15% of the wealth in this country. And that's been the end result of what we've seen following what Brzezinski said, because he said, as we move into the Technotronic era, there will be a transfer of wealth. Some of it went international, and a lot of it went and flowed to the upper class. When we have inflation, you lose buying power. But if governmental activity goes towards helping the corporations of the super rich make more money, okay, well, they're benefiting by increased tax revenue because you're pushed into a higher tax bracket, right? When you're having inflation, what do? You ask your boss for more money. Hey, 6% inflation. I want a 6% raise. I will give you 3. But then pretty soon you have bracket creep into a higher tax bracket, and now you're paying more taxes into projects that benefit who? The wealthy and elite corporations. They love it. The system benefits them. Debt benefits them. It hurts you. So when we take a look at Brzezinski and what he foretold, and we take a look at Pat Wood and the book Trilaterals over Washington, both men identified very clearly where this country was going. And what was coming is no longer coming, ladies and gentlemen. It's here. It's here. And in the next segment, I'm going to take a big leap here. And I'm going to just say this again. Okay. Um, I don't have an anti-Jewish bone in my body. And I've said it before recently quite a bit. My grandmother's maiden name, Germany, right? Origin, Freiburg. And you can probably guess why my family on my dad's side came here. And they weren't all Jewish, but there was a Jewish component in my family line on that side. And yet, when I go through and I talk about in the next segment, I'm going to give you 8 reasons that we should be reassessing our relationship with the nation of Israel because they have such bad leadership. This has nothing to do with the Jewish faith. It has nothing to do with Jewish people. I need us as America, you do too, to have a good, solid relationship with Israel because if we're on the same side, there are rapid deployment force militarily when oil supplies have historically been threatened by the old Soviet Union and bad actors in the Middle East. They've served a valuable role. But I also look and say, at what point in time do you say this relationship is no longer working? In fact, if America and Israel were spouses, I would argue that one spouse is cheating on the other spouse repeatedly and then always promising, I'll never do it again. And we have a bad relationship with Israel as far as you go. And if you don't think this NDAA agreement of where Israel will have access to our R&D, research and development, that means DARPA, that means the Pentagon, that means advanced weapon systems on a level that we have kept from them in the past. Now, I like how people say, well, Israeli generals aren't going to be bossing American troops around. I don't know what the future holds with the evolution of this relationship, but I can tell you right up front, Israel puts themselves on the same plane as America with weapon systems and intel and scientific advancements. And the reason they're doing it, I'll cover in the next segment. And then I'll cover what I think needs to happen. Because if Israel wants a good relationship with America, then they have to engage in a mutually beneficial relationship for both parties. Because right now, America is a codependent spouse that's being abused. I'm Dave Hodges. This is the Common Sense Show. More to come. If you have not signed up for our newsletter, you should really think about doing that. Why? Because it's one-stop shopping for about 90% of what we do. Everything is right there, sent to your email box. Go to thecommonsenseshow.com, click on the newsletter link, put in your email, and we'll send you everything that we do. And it's free, and people like it. We'll see you back here in the next segment. Stay with us.